Namo Buddhaya. Good evening. Welcome to the Buddha Dhamma TV. I am Lisa Chi. Today, we begin our program with a Buddhist hymn called the Paticca Samuppada by Visarada Sirima Ratnayaka of Sri Lanka.
Paticca Samuppada. Avijja paccaya sankhara, sankhara paccaya viññāṇam, viññāṇa paccaya nama rūpaṃ, nama rūpa paccaya salayatanam, salayatana paccaya passo, passa paccaya vedana, vedana paccaya tanha, tanha paccaya upadanam, upadana paccaya bhavo, bhava paccaya jati, jati paccaya jara maranam, sota parideva dukkha domanasya payasa sambhavanti, evametasya kevalasya dukkha kandasya samudayo hoti, avijjāyatdeva asesa viraga nirodha, sankhara nirodho, sankhara nirodha, viññāṇa nirodho, viññāṇa nirodha, nama rūpa nirodho, nama rūpa nirodha, salayatana nirodho, salayatana nirodha, passa nirodho, passa nirodha, vedana nirodho, vedana nirodha, tanha nirodho, tanha nirodha, upadana nirodho, upadana nirodha, bhava nirodho, bhava nirodha, jati nirodha jara maranam soka parideva dukkha domanassu payasa nirujjanti evametasya kevalasya dukkha kandasya nirodho hoti.
Our next program segment features Venerable Dr. Chandana as he explains Chula Vedala Sutta from the sacred text of the Majjhima Nikaya. In this discourse, a layman by the name of Vishat asked a nun named Dhammadina about various difficult matters, including some of the highest meditation attainments. The Buddha fully endorses her answers.
Last week we covered the Dutiya Kamabhu Sutta, and a wonderful sutta which was a conversation between the lay person, Chitta, and Venerable Kamabhu. And he was asking questions on different topics which culminated on the attainment of the Sanya Vedaita Nirodha Samapatti, which is the cessation of perceptions and feelings. But he also asked a series of other questions. Today's discourse is a special one because it is also a question and answer type of a thing, but it is between a former husband and wife. The questioner, again, this time is a layperson. This time it's not Chitta, the householder, but it is Visakha, the householder, a businessman. Now, in Pali, in those days actually, at the time of Lord Buddha, men and women had pretty much the same, sometimes the same name. So you would see Visakha and Visakha. When it ended with an A, it was the female, or version of that. So in this case, when we say Visakha, it is a male. Because we have also Visakha, some of you are familiar with, and she was the greatest benefactress, the greatest supporter of the sasana, of Lord Buddha and the Sangha. She was so rich that the king had to borrow money from her. That's how powerful and wealthy she was. So she was the female counterpart of Anathapindika, whom you've heard about in so many suttas. He was the male benefactor. So in India, in the city of Shravasti or Savatthi, you have Anathapindika's monastery on one side, and on the eastern side of Savatthi you have Visakha's monastery. Because she didn't want to go back and forth, you know. She said, why don't I just build a monastery for the Lord Buddha here, close to my house? And voila, there was a monastery. So anyhow, this is not about her. I just mentioned her name because the name sounds familiar or similar. So this is about the questioner that I mentioned, Visakha. And the person who's being questioned is his former wife. A little bit of a background story. There was Visakha, who was a very wealthy businessman, and he had, just to kind of cut to the chase, he had gone to listen to Lord Buddha giving a Dhamma talk. That day, during the Dhamma talk, he attains to the state of anagami, non-returner. It happens. He was fully there. His heart was listening, not just his inside of between his ears, communication. There was no stories. Sati was there. And the right moment came and he became an anagami. Okay, it's evening. And now he goes home to his wife. He goes home to his wife, and she's respectful, obviously, her husband's here now. So she makes sure everything is fine for him, sets dinner, this and that. But there's something different about him. He's more serene, more quiet, more secluded even, pulled in. And they go to the bedroom, and he sits at the edge of the bed. She's waiting for him, and he gets up and he lies down on the ground. She looks around and she lies next to him, down on the ground. He gets up, goes back to bed. She's perplexed, she gets up and she joins him in bed. He gets up and goes back down to the floor. She's now really confused. She says, "Husband, have I done anything wrong? Why are you mad at me? Did I do something?" And he says, "Oh, no, 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 no." She says, why are you avoiding me? Is there something I'm doing wrong? Have I done? And he says, "Absolutely not." And he says, "I have something to tell you." And she says, "What?" And he says, "Something happened tonight during the talk that Lord Buddha gave, and I lost the desire for being a husband to his wife fully. So I cannot do the physical part of..." And he says just straight away, "I don't think we can live together as husband and wife." So she's shocked. And he says, "However, if you like for us to live together, I think we can do that, but only as brother and sister." She says, "Very well." He says, "However, if you like, if that's not acceptable to you, I totally understand, you're free to marry someone else." And she turns around and tells him, "I cannot swallow the vomit that you spewed out." And he says, "What do you mean?" She says, "If you are now more dedicated to the Dhamma, for a long time I've actually been wanting to become a bhikkhuni, to go forth. So if you are pulling away from sensuality and sexuality, thank you. I want to become a nun." And she asks him, "Do you have any objection to that?" And he says, "Absolutely not. I rejoice in your decision. You're free." So she goes off and she becomes a nun. She becomes a bhikkhuni. After some time, he doesn't know this, she returns back to Rajagaha, where she wants to pay homage to Lord Buddha. And then he hears about her being back in Rajagaha. And he goes and finds her, and he starts to ask her a series of questions, because he's not an arahant. She is, because she became an arahant not long after that, because she had worked on it for some time in the past, and her aspirations were in the right place, and her dedication was impeccable. She became an arahant. So the commentators say that he was thinking that she might have lost her faith, that's why she left her training and came back to Rajagaha, without realizing that she had just come back to Rajagaha because she found out that Lord Buddha was there and she wanted to pay homage. And as an arahant, that's what many of them had done. they would go to pay homage to see Lord Buddha, and not to get validation, like the certificate, like I was joking about, a few times. You're an arahant, because if the person is an arahant, they will know they don't need anybody's confirmation. So she just wanted to share that joy with her teacher, Lord Buddha. So meanwhile, he's thinking maybe she lost her faith, so let me go and test her by asking her a bunch of questions on the Dhamma, to maybe hopefully get her to be excited enough and dedicated back to go ahead and train some more. So, because he's not an arahant. So this is what's happening. This is the gist of the sutta. It's a beautiful sutta. And, but I'll let you be the judge of that. So this is from the Majjhima Nikaya, number 44, Middle Length Discourses. This is the Chula Vedalla Sutta. Chula means smaller, shorter, versus Mahavedalla. Mahavedalla, we have that as well, because if you have a Chula Vedalla, you must have a Maha. And the Mahavedalla Sutta is also in the Majjhima Nikaya, and that one is between Venerable Sariputta, who's being questioned, by another Arahant, Venerable Mahakothita, and who's also an Arahant. They're not testing each other. It's just Venerable Mahakothita bringing in his own students, his own bhikkhus, in the presence of Venerable Sariputta and his own bhikkhus, so that those bhikkhus could actually learn something from this interaction between the two Arahants. That's why there's so much compassion and love. Many people forget that. When they look at the Theravada tradition, they say, oh, you guys are so self-obsessed, you don't care, you don't have that bodhisattva thing that my Highness later on brought. It's replete, it's full. When you look at the suttas, it's full of compassion. It's overflowing. You see it in the example of Lord Buddha and every one of the Arya Savakas. These two Arahants. They don't need to worry about struggling. They just want to make sure, okay, how can we benefit our students? Okay, let's have this discussion where I can just pretend that I don't know, and I ask Venerable Sariputta. So that's from the Mahavedalla Sutta. So this is the Chula Vedalla Sutta, the shorter, even though you're going to discover that it's not that short, although I'm going to try to go through it as fast as I can, given our time constraints. So, a shorter discourse on a series of clarifications. Sometimes they're called questions and answers. So I like the term series of clarifications because you see Venerable Dhammadinna clarifying one point after another, one point after another. So Chula Vedalla Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya number 44. I have personally heard this. At one time, the Blessed One lived in the squirrel's sanctuary in the city of Rajagaha. Then Visakha, the lay disciple, approached the Bhikkhuni Dhammadinna, and after paying his respects, sat to one side and said, Personality, personality, it is said, Venerable Lady, what is it that the Blessed One speaks of while explaining this thing called personality? Sakaya, that sense of me, myself, my personhood. Friend Visakha, in explaining this thing called personality, what the Blessed One is speaking of are none other than the 5 grabbing aggregates. Pancha Upadana Khanda, the thing which makes us, me, that identity, which are, and she clarifies, you can tell that she's a very good teacher. She doesn't just give us short answers like, okay, well, go deal with it, you find out. She said in brief, and now she needs to elaborate. which are the aggregate of material form one keeps grabbing onto. That's the upadana part. Name and form, nama-rupa. The aggregate of feelings one keeps grabbing onto, vedana. The aggregate of memories or mental associations one keeps grabbing onto, or perceptions. Oftentimes many people translate it as perceptions, sanya. The aggregate of habitual tendencies one keeps grabbing onto, sankhara. And the aggregate of consciousness one keeps grabbing onto, vijnana. In this way, the 5 grabbing aggregates are seen as none other than what is represented as personality, according to the teaching of the Blessed One. By saying sadhu, the lay disciple Visakha was joyfully delighted in hearing the explanation provided by the bhikkhuni Dhammadina, as he continued by asking a further question. It's interesting, I've always wondered about this, I always try to put myself as a member of the audience, somebody who's sitting there in a corner as this discussion is going on, knowing the background story. They used to be a husband and wife. The protocol is completely different now. She's an arahant. I mean, you have to absorb that somehow. And he is like in hands in Anjali, on his knees, in her presence. He used to be her husband, her father-like person, you know. Because when you marry someone, especially, I'm presuming, most probably he was much older than her. And now he's in Anjali and he's listening very carefully. He's in the presence of a teacher. And she's giving him some very serious Dhamma answers. So I'm always fascinated with that human element, the contextual elements, which bring it to life for us. They should. Because the suttas are full of life and relatedness. We can relate to these. So he continues. Source of personality. Source of personality, it is said. Venerable Lady, what is it that the Blessed One speaks of while explaining this thing called source of personality? Now when we say source, samudaya, we need to think of samudaya, that's the Pali term for it. Sometimes it's called the cause. So first, he's not, you know, somebody from the street. This isn't anagami you're talking about. They don't have sensual desires anymore, the lust and all that. They have cut all the 5 fetters, the lower fetters. So we're talking about the top 2 levels of the highest order of awakened individuals. So when he's asking these questions, first he's talking about sakkaya, that sense of selfhood, personality. And now he's talking about source of that, the cause of that. Do these ring a bell? Something and its cause? Ah, yes, 4 Noble Truths. So he is using the formula of the 4 Noble Truths, but interchanging it with sakkaya, personality. So instead of using dukkha, he's using sakkaya, which is the same thing, suffering. So the second logical question for him is, what is the cause of this? And that's what every teacher should be asking you to understand. This thing that you're complaining about, this painful thing, okay, identify it first. It is this, okay? What is its source? We often forget to ask that. Earlier, if you noticed, that's why I asked you, what's going on? You said the thoughts, stories. Think of stories as what? Dukkha, sakkaya. The second question is, what is its source? No sati. If you keep the door open at night, rats are going to come in. It's not the rat's fault. It's your fault because you let the door open. There's no sati. Close the door. So, the second is the source of personality is asking. And this is her answer. Friend Visakha, in explaining this thing called source of personality, what the Blessed One is speaking of is the very same craving that leads to rebirth in the future, along with the desire and lust that seeks to be delighted here and there. A little bit of this, you get bored, you go there. Not necessarily physically, but the mind is doing that all the time. You think about this, and then all of a sudden your story becomes bland, boring. And then the mind says, don't worry, I got the right story for you. What is that? That is Pono Bhavika. Pono Bhavika means the craving to become. Again. A little bit of here, jumping over there. It's like wanting to travel. You've traveled here, there, oh, okay, don't worry. Oh, we'll figure out another place for us to go. Or you've tried all these sweets in this sweet shop. Okay, don't worry, we'll find another sweet shop so we can go and grab that. That's what people are doing. That's what advertisements are all about. Commercials are all about that. Oh, you don't like this dress? Don't worry, we'll find something else. That's what the mind is always doing. Craving, constantly. Along with the desire and lust, raga. In Pali, raga, that seeks to be delighted here and there. In other words, it is the craving for more sensual pleasures, the craving for re-becoming, and the craving for no more being. No more being is also a type of craving. No, I just want to end this. Does that sound familiar? I want to end this, I'm done. What is that? You're still craving something. You're trying to crave another state of affairs than this. Get me out of here. Somebody who's in pain can write a book on that. They know how that feels. But in this Dhamma and discipline, in this Dhamma and Vinaya, that is also seen as craving. That is meant when explaining the source of personality, according to the teaching of the Blessed One. Because who is it that wants to no more become? A personality. I am this, and I no longer want this. For this. I, mine, myself. We don't like this, whatever it is. Now, if you're following the Four Noble Truth formula, you have an idea what the next question is going to be, right? I see a lot of nodding heads. The ending of personality. The ending of personality. Nirodha. Venerable Lady, what is it that the Blessed One speaks of while explaining the ending of personality? Friend Visakha, in explaining the ending of personality, what the Blessed One is speaking of is the complete ending of that same craving mentioned. The dispassionate attitude, viraga, that allows passions to fade away. You're no longer passionate about it. You understand why is it that you want to no longer be. You understand the process, the pain. If you're really, let's say, burnt, like a burnt victim, somebody who's really second, first, second, especially third degree burns, pretty bad. What do? You just want to end, or if you have a severe, bad, painful toothache, just one tooth makes you get sick of life. If you've ever had that kind of a toothache, and you have no way to take care of it, no dentist to be found, makes you want to think about ending your life. One time I was a kid, I was still like, this is before my major injury, foot explosion in Lebanon. This also happened in Lebanon a year earlier, when I was about 7. I'm laughing, it's not sadistic or, but just masochistic. But we were having dinner, it was dark, and the power would go out often, conserving of, power and all that, electricity. The whole city would be, no lights. So we would have, in the wintertime, we would have this small butane gas heater. And so that would be light source, and also candles, like a few, around the house. So there was something like this, like a sofa, and my grandmother was sitting there, and my siblings were there, 2 of them, and my mom was sitting here, and my dad was sitting here, and I was sitting on the other side. And my mother went and, so the tea finished, so she made new, batch of, the tea kettle, big one, and then she poured some, and then she said, make sure that it's right here. So she put it, there was carpeting, but then she had a padding, and then she put it right next to her on the ground. I finished. I got up, and I walked behind my dad, behind my mother, and I came down on this side, putting my right foot onto the ground, thinking it's going to land on the ground, but it just landed into the very hot kettle. My feet were so small that the tea kettle's, lid, as the force went on it, the tea kettle's lid came off, and my foot went into the hot tea. I could still feel like the rush. At first it feels like very, very cold. Thing just went up straight to the top of my head, and then I felt the rush of heat. So anyhow, that took care of the rest of my, 3, 4, 5 months. I had to go to the fire department, and because they had to really work on allowing the dead skin, because it was really nasty burn. It was like 3rd-degree burn. But during that time, it was so painful that I just didn't want to, sometimes I just didn't want to exist, because they had to really use tweezers, not to really gross you out, but to remove the dead skin to allow the new one to grow. They didn't have the technology, but it was very painful to remove the dead skin. So I know that's just, there's many, many worse examples, I'm sure, that many other people could come up with from personal experience. That was mine, and it was pretty bad. But whose foot was it, now that I think of it, after the fact? But we have many examples, each of us, where we have been in situations where we just want to exit, we just don't want to be there. But there's got to be a sense of identification. In other words, tanha, craving. Something precious is taken from us, or not being allowed to come into our lives. We need it. We know we need it. But somehow the conditions aren't there. It's painful. That's dukkha. Powerful dukkha. And here, the Venerable Dhammadinna, she's pointing out the ending of personality. What the Blessed One is speaking of is the complete ending of that same craving mentioned, the dispassionate attitude that allows passions to fade away. Another word for viraga is fading away. Not just passionlessness, but also fading away, allowing it to just be. Now I can talk even whimsically about that incident because it's going to go away. See, many of us think of anicca as something horrible, impermanence as something so bad. I have something wonderful that's happening to me, and you mean to say, Bhante, that life is going to come and strip that away from me? That's anicca. But it works the other way too. When you're having a very bad experience, even a long one, where you want something and you're being deprived of it, even that is impermanent, which is a good thing, right? That means the suffering is also impermanent. That's great. But we have a tendency of not looking at it that way. So impermanent is also wonderful, depending on how you use it. Even your suffering is temporary. The total and remainderless detachment and destruction of craving. When they say remainderless, she's talking about the level of arahantship. It is no more going to come back, remainderless, which is called the cessation of suffering. That, friend Visakha, is what is meant when explaining the ending of personality, according to the teaching of the Blessed One. Again, we're doing the formula of the Four Noble Truths, so now he's going to be asking about the path. The way of practicing that leads to the ending of personality. The way of practicing that leads to the ending of personality. See, he's asking twice. And we don't know if actually when they were having this dialogue, he did ask twice each of these things. But if he did, wonderful. If he didn't, the reciters of the suttas did us a big favor, because over centuries, sometimes if it's only said once, somebody might have made a mistake if it's only mentioned once. But if it's twice mentioned, you know that, oh, okay, so this is what they were saying. The odds are far less for it to be misunderstood, because they didn't have any writing for 500 years. It was just recitation of the sutta. So this is a wonderful mechanism for the repetition of the first question. It's the same thing. So the way of practicing that leads to the ending of personality, Venerable Lady, what is it that the Blessed One speaks of while explaining the way of practicing that leads to the ending of personality? Friend Visakha, in explaining the way of practicing that leads to the ending of personality, what the Blessed One is speaking of is none other than the Noble Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, which itself is the very way of practicing that brings about the ending of personality. That is, she's explaining it, right view, right intentions, right speech, right actions, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right collectedness of mind, right samadhi. Every single one of the links are stamped by Sammaditthi. Sammaditthi does not happen just with the first of the Noble Eightfold Path, the first level, first stage. It must be present within every single one of those factors. That's what makes speech samma. That's what makes action samma. Samma, what is the samma? It's sammaditthi. It has to be present. That is why Lord Buddha placed it as the very first. If you get the view wrong, you get the rest of it wrong. You've heard me for many, many weeks and months actually here really challenging the status quo of the world, the Buddhist way of the catechism or the teaching methodologies, the pedagogical current structures of what's going on in the world of Dhamma, what's being promulgated. You've seen me be sometimes quite openly critical. because I often am seeing a wrong view present and being promulgated as right view. Because others are doing it, so let's do it too. There's a deviation from the teachings of Lord Buddha. We have to bring it back, coax it back. That's been my attempt all this time. That's why the urgency, Samvega, has to be there for the practice. What is it that we're practicing? Is it right view to begin with? Let us just ask the question. Why am I going to listen to this teacher? Really? Last week I talked about the emotional sense of appeasement. It makes me feel good if I go and listen to this teacher. Okay, good. So what? Ultimately, are you walking away with something so tangible that you can put in your pocket, that you can apply during the week when it's really, really tough? Or are you treating that as like a hit, like a heroin addict does, every once in a while? So you have to go again and again and again. Well, you haven't learned anything then. Right view is missing. That's why so many people want to get attached to this teacher, this teaching, have several teachers, left and right, constantly, be involved in different programs. Why? Because they cannot face themselves. They're running away from themselves. That means they cannot stand on their 2 feet. There is no right view. So this is a responsible path. The Dhamma is a personal responsibility, that is. You must say to yourself, am I happy? And if you're not, you have to declare it to yourself. You know what? I'm not happy. Remember last week I said Kalamas. The Kalamas were really courageous people. They went to Lord Buddha and said, you know what, Gautama, we're confused. How many people can actually stand today and say, I'm confused? We're confused. How many people could do that? I don't know of any. Maybe a select handful. Because it takes tremendous sense of humility, courage, to say, and honesty to say, you know, this is not working. I have to be honest with myself. Something's wrong. Help me. I'm confused. And that's what they did. That's why they are on a totally different level, the Kalamas, than today, where we are. Because we are deceiving ourselves. We accumulate knowledge, knowledge, knowledge. And you know my position on knowledge that is undigested, right? It's poison. It's like undigested food. It's poison. Toxic. Take a little bit of the teachings Lord Buddha says in the Dhammapada and apply it. Right view. The Noble Eightfold Path, because I've seen people recite the Eightfold Path, just like they recite the Paticcasamuppada, recite. It's like a child reciting their ABCs. How is that going to help? Really? Let's be honest. So we have to be practical. Start with a smile. Yes. So, but, Venerable Lady, could it be that what often is termed as clinging or grabbing, upadana, is the same as the grabbing of the 5 aggregates? So he's asking, is upadana the same as pancha upadana khanda, which you, Venerable Dhammadinna, you just said the reason why there's a personality is because of the pancha upadana khanda, the 5 grabbing aggregates. So is this collection the same as upadana, such as we see in the Paticcasamuppada? He's not saying that, but she knows what he's saying. So he's asking, are they the same? Remember, We don't know for sure, but you can tell probably he's also kind of teasing her to see if she knows. Or is grabbing one thing and the grabbing of the five aggregates something entirely different? That is not so, friend Visakha, she says. For what often is termed as clinging or grabbing, upadana, is not the same as the grabbing of the five aggregates mentioned earlier, nor is grabbing one thing and the grabbing of the five aggregates something entirely different. So if you're the type of a thinker like Aristotelian way of thinking, you're like, wait a minute, what are you saying? This is like, you're saying the opposite. It's like, it's not, you need to hold your ground. You need to say, it's either this or this. Friend Visakha, so she's continuing. The desire and lust for experiencing and holding on to the five aggregates are themselves the very same grabbing. So you must have the lust, the longing to have something, which has to do with grabbing, which is at the core of the Pancha Upadana Khanda. But, Venerable Lady, how does the view that one possesses a separate personality come about? Here, friend Visakha, the undisciplined, mediocre person. That's in Pali, we have one single word for that. Putujjana.
Let us take a short break to enjoy the melodious song entitled, O Lord Buddha, Now I Promise, by GBs. This is a very meaningful and devotional hymn. Let's listen to it together.
Lord Buddha, now I promise my life shall ever be in always consecrated, fully to follow Thee. Within Thy holy teaching, I find my pathway sure, and in the Dhamma's guidance, my way shall be secure. Unto Thy blessed brotherhood, I look with trust complete, and find within Thy temple a light unto my feet. Thus may I daily travel along life-changing ways, and find at last the changeless beyond the count of days. Lord Buddha, now I promise my life shall ever be and always consecrated, fully to follow Thee, fully to follow Thee, fully to follow Thee.
Please now join us for our upcoming insightful talk with Venerable Dr. Bhante Punaji. Bhante's insights are remarkably rational, requiring our utter focus to unravel the profound depths of his Dharma discourses. Don't miss out as Dr. Bhante Punaji sheds light on the popular topic, happiness. Now, here is Dr. Bhante Punaji.
Last time we were really talking about goodness. What is goodness? And we said that to be good is mainly to be unselfish, because we normally the mind is a narrow mind, and our aim is to broaden the mind. And so the broad mind is the good mind, and the narrow mind is the bad mind. So that is what we normally see as good and bad. And it is good because it brings happiness to everyone. Not only happiness to oneself, but happiness to all. So it's not a selfish happiness, it's a happiness for all. So, and we also pointed out that that happiness is not an excitement, but a calm, tranquil, peaceful state of mind. And what normally people call happiness is pleasure. Now we have to distinguish between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure is stimulating the senses. If you see beautiful things, that is pleasure. If you listen to pleasant music, that is pleasure. If you smell pleasant perfumes, that is pleasure. If you taste pleasant food, that is pleasure. And if you experience pleasant touches, that is pleasure. So pleasure is all stimulating the senses. That is, we are referring to the pleasant sensation. There are three kinds of sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, and the neutral. So it is the pleasant sensation that people call happiness. But that is not the happiness that Buddha called happiness. Because the pleasant sensation can also make you unhappy. The pleasant sensation makes you unhappy when it is not there and you want it. You want the pleasant sensation, but it is not there. Then you are unhappy as a result. When the pleasant sensation is there, you become happy. In the same way, when the unpleasant sensation is present, you are unhappy. When the unpleasant sensation is absent, you are happy. So you get happiness from both pleasant as well as unpleasant sensations. So, and you get pain from both pleasant as well as unpleasant sensations. So the real happiness is when you don't have the desire for the pleasant sensation. And if you don't have the hatred for the unpleasant sensation, then you can be happy. So happiness is not a sensation. Happiness is a state of mind. Happiness is a state of mind which is not disturbed by pleasure or pain. So happiness is a state of mind. So this is why the Buddha speaks of the disadvantages කාමානං ආදීනවං ඕකාරං සංකිලේසං. These three words are very important about pleasure. Adinava means that pleasures are disadvantages, that it doesn't bring you real happiness. Pleasure only develops a desire for it. Pleasure makes you desire the pleasure, and then it goes away. It is like showing a chocolate to a child and taking it away. Huh? So, it makes you desire it and then it goes away, then you become unhappy. So, pleasure is not an advantage to go after pleasures. And okarang means that it is futile. It doesn't bring you satisfaction. So pleasure doesn't really bring you satisfaction. You only makes you unhappy. Sankilesang means it takes you away from the truth. It misleads you. You are not able to see. You are not able to think properly. It can prevent you from thinking properly. So it can be a hindrance as a result. So seeking pleasure becomes a hindrance. It hinders your progress. And then the Buddha speaks about the advantages of giving up pleasures. If you give up pleasures, that means you don't go after pleasures. And instead of that, you begin to purify the mind. And if you begin to purify the mind, that purity of mind brings happiness. So that purity of mind is the important thing. So instead of going after pleasures, we should learn to purify the mind. And by purifying the mind, we become happy as a result. And the method of purifying the mind is what we call meditation. So meditation is learning to purify the mind. And meditation is not concentration. This is the biggest mistake that people do today. They think meditation is concentration. You cannot purify the mind by trying to concentrate. Because concentration is like what is called a tug of war. You know what that is? Some people pull in one direction, the other people pull in the other direction. So the mind goes in two directions, and the mind is in a tug of war. And that is what it means. That is a very cumbersome act, trying to concentrate. So when you begin to concentrate, these are some things written yesterday. Huh? No, this was not written today. Yeah. So the important thing is that when you begin to concentrate, what happens? What is it that happens when you begin to concentrate? Some people work very hard at trying to concentrate. And when that happens, your mind gets tired. When you begin to concentrate, your mind gets tired. And when the mind gets tired, what happens? It goes to sleep. So the mind goes to sleep. So while you are trying to concentrate, your mind goes to sleep. And when the mind goes to sleep, what happens? You begin to dream. Now, when you are trying to concentrate, you are not lying down, no? You are either sitting or standing, you are trying to concentrate. And when the mind goes to sleep, when you are standing, what happens? You enter a state which is midway between waking and sleeping. That state which is midway between waking and sleeping is what is called the hypnotic state. So that is the hypnotic state. You enter the hypnotic state, and in the hypnotic state you begin to dream. And that dream is like sleepwalking. You know, you have heard of that, huh? So it's more like sleepwalking. So you are in a different world, but you are in a dream. So that sometimes that can be used for medical purposes. They speak of entering the subconscious mind or something like that. And what they do is they can put in information into the mind or take away information from the mind. And that kind of thing can be done in that hypnotic state. But some people think that meditation is entering the hypnotic state. Meditation is not entering the hypnotic state. Meditation is something completely different from this. So hypnosis and meditation are two different things. In the hypnotic state, you are unconscious. In meditation, you are conscious. That's the difference. But while in the hypnotic state, you may think you are conscious, but you are not conscious. But in the meditation state, you are fully conscious, because what you do in meditation is purifying the mind and freeing the mind of emotions. And so the mind calms down and you are aware of the calmness. All the agitations due to emotion is simply, I explained, a disturbance of the whole body, not only of the mind. So it's a disturbance of the body. And the way to get rid of that disturbance is to become conscious and to be relaxed. You can consciously relax the body instead of unconsciously and emotionally releasing the tension in action. Now, when you are emotionally excited, like if you are angry, there is tension in the body, and the tension makes you uncomfortable. And this discomfort you get rid of by releasing the tension in action. Action of speech or action of body. That is what you call using bad language or abusing people or fighting and quarreling. All that is the action part, which is the release of tension, which is done unconsciously. You are not conscious of the release of tension there. You are only conscious of doing something. You are not conscious that you are releasing tension. But when you relax the tension, you are doing it consciously. So it's a conscious act when you relax the tension. You are aware of the tension and you just let go. Now tension is when you hold like that, and let go is to let go. That is relaxation. So that you are consciously relaxing. So we have to distinguish between unconscious release of tension and conscious relaxation of tension. These are two different things. So, when we are conscious of the emotion and the tension, then we can learn to relax the tension. Now, some people, when they want to get rid of the emotion, they begin to use another emotion to go against that emotion. That is fighting. That doesn't work. That is what we call asceticism. Asceticism means you are giving discomfort and pain to your body. You are very angry that this emotion is there. That is called conquering the flesh or self-mortification. Mortify the flesh. And that is asceticism. But here we are learning to relax and calm the mind. That's a different thing. So this is the middle path shown by the Buddha. Middle path is not to take a little bit of that and little bit of this, but to give up both ways, which is being carried away by the emotion or trying to suppress or fight with the emotion. Instead of doing both, you take the third part, which is learning to purify the mind and relax the body. That is the middle path. So, that middle path is what is called the Noble Eightfold Path. It is called the Noble Eightfold Path because there are 8 steps in this process. 8 steps. And the first step is to understand the problem and its solution. We are having a problem. The problem is that the emotions are going against reality. And what is reality? Reality is what is seen by the mental process of thinking. When we begin to think, we are aware of what is going on, which is that everything in this world is dependent on conditions. Everything that happens in the world happens only when the necessary conditions are present. And when the necessary conditions are absent, it ceases to be. For example, if you want a flame, you strike a match. That is, you are providing the necessary conditions for a flame to arise. So when you provide the necessary conditions for the flame to arise, the flame comes up. And you blow out the, say it's a candle, you light the candle and then blow out. That means the flame disappears because the necessary conditions are not present. So blowing out is to take away at least one condition. If you take one condition out, it is gone. So this is the natural process, the nature. If you want to use the word nature, the nature is this, that everything that arises depending on the presence of the necessary conditions. That is what is called determinism. That determinism is the natural process, which the Buddha called paticca samuppada, today translated as dependent origination or something like that. But the better word is determinism itself. So the important thing is that even the mind is working according to this same law of determinism. And that means there is no person doing anything. These are mental processes going on depending on the necessary conditions. So when we think we are thinking, but there is no we or I to think. The thinking goes on because of the presence of the necessary conditions. When the necessary conditions are there, the thinking process goes on. When the conditions are absent, it stops. That's how it is. So there is no real person doing the thinking. This is what Sigmund Freud pointed out when he used the word psychic determinism. Psychic determinism means that the same law of determinism works in the mind. The mind also behaves according to this principle of determinism. And therefore there is no person doing anything here. But he used the word ego to refer to the thinking. If he didn't believe in a self here, why did he use the word ego? The only reason is that he had read Descartes. Because Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. So the real ego is the thinking process. So what people refer to as myself is ultimately that thinking process. But the thinking process is the activity of the brain. And that activity of the brain starts with perception. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching. When you have perceived something, then you begin to think. Not you, the brain begins to think. And that part of the brain that is responsible for thinking is called the cerebrum or the cerebral cortex. Now, all this necessary research has been done today by the modern scientists, but still every scientist is caught up in this delusion of self. That is the problem. So although the experiments and theories, all that, they have understood. So this is why it is possible to explain these things to the modern scientist. Because the modern scientists who are... But the problem is, in the modern world, science is also specialized. So that means one scientist knows only one part of science. Another scientist will know another part of science. But there is no scientist who knows that whole thing. This is the problem. So as a result, the scientist cannot understand the whole entire truth. This is the problem. So this is why a Buddha becomes necessary to show that the whole picture. It's only when the whole picture is seen that the scientist can become enlightened. But becoming enlightened is not enough. You have to become awakened. So I told you about the difference between enlightenment and awakening. So that what the Buddha achieved was awakening, not just enlightenment. So this is important. So it is the thinking part which we call mano, or in modern psychology is called cognition. It's the thinking part that is aware of reality. But the emotions are not aware of reality. Emotions simply means I want this, I hate this, I am frightened, or I am worried. That is all. That is emotion. It's like the child and the mother. The child and the mother are in conflict because the child wants the impossible and the mother says that is impossible, you cannot have that. No, I want it. I don't care whether it is impossible or not, I want it. Now that means conflict. So in the same way, we have the child and the mother inside us. The mother is the thinking part and the child is the emotional part. So these two parts come in conflict. So this is all the problems in psychology. And it's simply the conflict between the emotions and the thinking, reasoning part. That is what Sigmund Freud pointed out. But you know, during the time of Freud, there was another disciple of Freud, Alfred Adler. Now this man saw the thing in a slightly different way. Freud saw that the emotions are coming in conflict with reason. That is, the id is coming in conflict with the ego. But this man saw that it was the thinking part, the ego, that is coming in conflict with circumstances. He saw it in a slightly different way. Now the Buddha spoke of three things: Lobha, Dosa and Moha. Lobha refers to the desire for pleasure. Dosa refers to the hatred of pain. And Moha refers to the thought I am, the self. Now Freud focused on those two things, Lobha and Dosa. And Adler focused on the Moha part. This is why Adler saw it as a conflict between the self and the circumstances outside. So the later Freudians began to take the ideas of Adler and they began to think of developing the ego. The ego has to learn to deal with the problems that come up outside, the circumstances. This is why the modern Freudians are mainly focusing on developing the ego. So they speak of self-assertion. You have to learn to assert yourself because the neurotics they see as people who are not having self-confidence or that they are not able to deal with circumstances, a kind of weakness. That is why they think of the ego strengthening the ego through self-assertion. Now this is why the modern psychologists, when they go to learn meditation, they are not able to explain why the Buddha talks about giving up the ego, while the psychologists talk about self-assertiveness or developing the ego. So this is a big conflict, and some of these people are writing about this in books. And if you read some of those books, you'll begin to understand that they have not been able to solve that problem properly. But the important thing is to understand that emotions and ego are going on the same line. Freud emphasized the emotions, and what are called the neo-Freudians emphasized the ego. That's the main thing. So you see, when we get rid of the emotions, the ego automatically goes away, because the ego is an emotional feeling, not a rational concept. The self is not a rational concept. It is an emotional feeling. And so, when we give up the emotions and the tension that comes with the emotion, the feeling of self disappears. That means when we have learned to relax the body fully and calm the mind, the feeling of self disappears. This is why even some of these Christian what are called mystics, they realize the self disappears. They also, some of them are able to calm the mind to that point where the mind is purified and they calm the mind. And when they calm the mind, the self disappears. And when the self disappears, they begin to wonder, what happened to myself? And they think they have united with God. That's how they get into that illusion. Because they can't get rid of the idea of God. You see? So the self unites with God. But the thing is, a Buddhist who has understood that there is no real self to talk about, and rationally understood that, and then begins to meditate and purify the mind, then you begin to be confirmed, yes, the self, I felt the self only because of the emotions and the tensions. When the emotions and tensions are gone, I don't feel the self. But later, when the emotions come up again, the self comes back. So they are convinced that there is no real self, but I get the feeling of self when the tensions come up. Then you are convinced that there is no real self. This self is coming from the tensions and the emotions. That is the conviction where the idea of self disappears. And that is what is called a stream entrant. One who enters the stream is to realize that there is no self.
We have already given a brief introduction of Jataka stories, a recollection of some of Buddha's previous life when he was known as a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means one who strives hard to serve all beings selflessly. These stories are an excellent source of motivation that can guide us in the right direction. Please encourage children and adults to read these stories and watch these programs. They will surely help guide them towards success. Now, here is Kunsalani, Jataka story.
กุศนาลิชาดกณบ้านมหาเศรษฐีนามอนาถบิณฑิกะได้เกิดเรื่องวุ่นวายขึ้นเมื่ออนาถบิณฑิกะเศรษฐีได้คบหากับมิตรผู้ที่ฐานะต่ำต้อยกว่าและได้แต่งตั้งให้บุรุษผู้นั้นเป็นผู้ดูแลสมบัติทั้งหมดของตนเหล่าบรรดาญาติพวกพ้องของท่านอนาถบิณฑิกะต่างแสดงความไม่พอใจและขอให้ท่านเศรษฐีเลิกคบหากับมิตรผู้นั้น
ท่านเศรษฐีเชื่อฉันเถอะอย่าคบกับบุคคลผู้นี้เลย
เราไม่เข้าใจว่าท่านทนคบกับคนที่ต่ำต้อยกว่าได้เช่นไร
ท่านเศรษฐีดูเอาเถอะคนผู้นี้ไม่ทัดเทียมกับท่านเลยทั้งชาติโคตรทรัพย์และธัญชาติ
ธรรมดาความสนิทสนมกับฉันมิตรกับคนที่ต่ำกว่าก็ดีคนที่เสมอกันก็ดีคนที่สูงกว่าก็ดีควรกระทำทั้งนั้นพวกท่านหยุดพูดเถิดเราได้ตัดสินใจแล้ว
ในครั้งนั้นพระสัมมาสัมพุทธเจ้าทรงประทับอยู่ณพระเชตวันมหาวิหารเมื่อพึงทราบเรื่องที่เกิดขึ้นพระองค์จึงตรัสกับเหล่าญาติเศรษฐีว่าดูก่อนคฤหบดีธรรมดามิตรเสมอด้วยตนก็ดีต่ำกว่าตนก็ดียิ่งกว่าตนก็ดีควรคบไว้เหตุว่ามิตรเหล่านั้นแม้ทั้งหมดย่อมช่วยแบ่งเบาภาระที่มาถึงตนได้ทั้งนั้นบัดนี้ท่านอาศัยมิตรผู้ชี้ขาดการงานของตนจึงเป็นเจ้าของขุมทรัพย์ได้สืบไปอนาถบิณฑิกะเศรษฐีได้กราบทูลอาราธนาองค์พระศาสดาจึงทรงนำเรื่องในอดีตมาสาธกดังต่อไปนี้ในอดีตการครั้งพระเจ้าพรหมทัตเสวยราชสมบัติอยู่ในพระนครพาราณสีในอุทยานของพระราชามีต้นรุจมงคลอาศัยมงคลศิลามีลำต้นตั้งตรงแผ่กิ่งก้านสาขาสวยงามได้รับการยกย่องจากราชสำนักเรียกกันว่าต้นสมุขกะหรือต้นไม้พูดได้เพราะมีเทวดาสิงอยู่เทวราชผู้มีศักย์ใหญ่ตนหนึ่งบังเกิดที่ต้นไม้นั้นบริเวณข้างๆต้นไม้มงคลมีกอหญ้าที่มีรุกขเทวดาอาศัยอยู่ด้วยรุจจาเทวดาเทวราชผู้มีศักดิ์ที่อาศัยอยู่ในต้นไม้มงคลและกุศนาลิเทวดารุกขเทวดาที่อาศัยอยู่ในกอหญ้าคบหาเป็นมิตรสหายโดยไม่ได้คำนึงถึงศักดิ์ที่ต่างกันแม้แต่น้อย
วันนี้อากาศดีจริงๆเลยนะท่าน
ใช่อากาศดีอย่างเนี้ยน่าจะมีแต่เรื่องดีๆเกิดขึ้นนะท่านว่าไหม
เราก็ไม่รู้ว่ามันจะเกี่ยวกันหรือเปล่าแต่ก็อยากให้เป็นดังที่ท่านว่า
ครั้งนั้น พระราชาเสด็จประทับอยู่ในปราสาทเสาเดียวเสาของปราสาทนั้นหวั่นไหวพวกราชบุรุษพากันกราบทูลความหวั่นไหวของเสานั้นแด่พระราชา
โอ้ยเกิดอะไรขึ้นเนี่ยทำไมปราสาทของเรามันถึงได้สั่นไหวเช่นนี้
ขอเดชะเป็นเพราะเสาปราสาทนั้นผุกร่อนสั่นไหวจึงทำให้ปราสาทไหวตามพะยะค่ะ
พวกเจ้ามัวทำอะไรกันอยู่รู้ว่าเสาผุก็หาเสาใหม่มาเปลี่ยนสิไม่ไหวเลยปล่อยให้ปราสาทไหวอยู่ได้
พะยะค่ะเมื่อรู้ว่าปราสาทสั่นไหวเหตุเป็นเพราะเสาผุกร่อนพระราชาจึงรับสั่งให้ทหารรีบหาเสาใหม่มาเปลี่ยนในเร็ววันเหล่าทหารต่างก็เร่งหาต้นไม้ต้นใหม่มาใช้แทนเสาต้นเก่ากันจ้าละวันในที่สุดก็พบต้นไม้ที่เหมาะสมเฮ้ยพวกเราช่วยกันเร่งมือหาหน่อยเว้ยเอาต้นไม้ต้นไหนดีเนี่ย
เฮ้ยนั่นไงเอาต้นไม้ต้นนั้นสิต้นใหญ่เชียวน่าจะแข็งแรงดีนะพี่เนี่ย
ดีแต่ต้นไม้ต้นนี้มันต้นไม้มงคลต้นสมุขกะต้องเรียนพระราชาก่อนจะตัดได้หรือเปล่าก็ไม่รู้นะ
ก็ดีนะสิพรุ่งนี้เราค่อยมากันใหม่แล้วกันนะพบแล้วพะยะค่ะต้นไม้ที่เหมาะสำหรับทำเสาปราสาทว่ายังไงนะพวกเจ้าเห็นแล้วเหรอพะยะค่ะ
พวกข้าพระองค์พากันเข้าสู่พระอุทยานในพระอุทยานนั้นเหล่าเว้นต้นมงคลพฤกษ์แล้วก็ไม่เห็นต้นอื่นๆเนื่องจากเป็นมงคลพฤกษ์พวกข้าพระองค์จึงไม่กล้าตัดต้นไม้นั่นพระเจ้าค่ะ
พวกเจ้าจงพากันไปตัดเถิดจะได้ทำปราสาทให้มั่นคงเราจะตั้งต้นอื่นเป็นมงคลพฤกษ์แทนพะยะค่ะ
หลังจากรับคำสั่งจากพระราชาแล้วพวกช่างไม้และทหารจึงพากันถือเครื่องพลีกรรมไปสู่อุทยานวันนี้พวกเรามากระทำพลีกรรมแก่ต้นไม้ก่อนแล้วพรุ่งนี้ค่อยมาตัด
ดีเลยวันเนี้ยเดินไปเดินมาล้าไปหมดแล้วนะเนี่ยปะกลับกันก่อนดีกว่าพวกเราพรุ่งนี้ค่อยทำงานกันต่อนะ
เมื่อรุจาเทวดารู้ว่าต้นไม้มงคลที่อาศัยอยู่จะถูกตัดพรุ่งนี้ก็เศร้าโศกเสียใจ
พวกทหารจะมาตัดต้นไม้แล้วทีนี้เราจะเอาต้นไม้ที่ไหนสถิตล่ะทีเนี้ย
หมู่รุกขเทวดาที่รู้จักมักคุ้นของเทวดานั้นพากันไต่ถามถึงเรื่องที่เกิดขึ้นครั้นได้ฟังแล้วก็ไม่สามารถที่จะช่วยเหลืออะไรได้
เรามองไม่เห็นหนทางที่จะช่วยท่านได้จริง
ๆนั่นน่ะสิในอุทยานเนี่ยก็มีไม้ใหญ่อยู่แค่ต้นนี้ต้นเดียว
กุศนาลิเทวดาเมื่อรู้ถึงเรื่องที่เกิดขึ้นก็เข้ามาปลอบใจและคิดหาวิธีแก้ไข
ช่างเถิดอย่ามัวเสียใจเลยเราจะไม่ให้คนตัดต้นไม้นั้นพรุ่งนี้เวลาพวกช่างมาพวกท่านคอยดูเถอะเราจะจัดการแก้ไขปัญหานี้เอง
รุ่งเช้าทหารและนายช่างก็ถือเครื่องมือและพากันเดินเข้ามาในอุทยานเตรียมตัวที่จะตัดต้นไม้มงคลแหมเช้านี้อากาศดีจริงๆเว้ยทำงานกันเถอะพวกเรารีบตัดไปจะได้รีบไปซ่อมเสาที่ปราสาท
เช้าอย่างนี้แรงกำลังดีเลยล่ะพี่อ่ะลุยเลยพวกเราโอ้หุยเลยหุย
ทำยังไงดีล่ะท่านพวกทหารเข้ามาตัดไม้กันแล้วท่านอย่าวิตกกังวลไปเลยเดี๋ยวเราจัดการเอง
เมื่อทหารกับนายช่างเดินเข้ามาใกล้ต้นไม้กุศนาลิเทวดาจึงแปลงกายเป็นกิ้งก่าวิ่งนำหน้าพวกช่างไม้เข้าไปสู่โคนของมงคลพฤกษ์กุศนาลิเทวดารุกขเทวดาที่อาศัยอยู่ในกอหญ้าเมื่อแปลงร่างเป็นกิ้งก่าแล้วก็วิ่งเข้าไปสู่โคนของมงคลพฤกษ์กระทำประหนึ่งต้นไม้นั้นเป็นโพรงต้นไม้นี่เป็นโพรงแล้วเนี่ยเฮ้ยทำไมเมื่อวานเจ้าไม่ตรวจให้ดีๆเสียเวลามิเนี่ย
ว้ายแย่เลยเอาต้นนี้ไปทำเป็นเสาปราสาทต้องล่มแน่ๆเลยงานเนี่ยโดนด่าอีกแล้วเรา
เจ้านี่ทำงานไม่ได้เรื่องเลยไปเลยไปรีบไปหาต้นไม้ที่อื่นเลยในอุทยานไม่มีเจ้าก็ต้องออกไปหาที่ป่าโน่นไปเลย
โอ้ยเหนื่อยอีกแล้วตู
แผ นที่กุศนาลิเทวดาวางไว้ประสบผลสำเร็จทหารและช่างไม้เลิกล้มความคิดที่จะตัดต้นไม้มงคลเหล่ารุกขเทวดาในอุทยานต่างแสดงความดีใจกับรุจจาเทวดาจึงได้จัดการประชุมกลุ่มรุกขเทวดาขึ้นเพื่อแสดงความดีใจกับรุจจาเทวดาที่ไม่ต้องเสียต้นไม้มงคลแหล่งอาศัย
เราได้วิมานของเรากลับคืนมาแล้วดูก่อนเทพยเจ้าผู้เจริญทั้งหลายชาวเราถึงจะเป็นเทวดามเหสักก็ไม่รู้อุบายนี้เพราะปัญญาทึบส่วนเทวดากุศนาลิได้กระทำให้เราเป็นเจ้าของวิมานได้เพราะญาณสมบัติของตนข้าพเจ้าเป็นเทวดาเกิดที่ไม้รุจาและเทวดาเกิดที่กอหญ้าคามีศักดิ์น้อยข้าพเจ้าแม้จะมีศักดามากก็ไม่อาจบำบัดทุกข์ที่เกิดแก่ตนได้เพราะเป็นคนเขลาไม่ฉลาดในอุบายแต่ได้อาศัยเทวดาผู้นี้แม้จะมีศักดาน้อยก็เป็นบัณฑิตจึงพ้นจากทุกข์ได้ฉะนั้นแม้คนอื่นๆประสงค์จะพ้นทุกข์ก็ไม่จำเป็นต้องคำนึงถึงความเสมอกันและความวิเศษกว่ากันพึงคบมิตรทั้งต่ำทั้งประณีต
รุจจาเทวดาแสดงธรรมแก่หมู่เทวดาด้วยคาถานี้ดำรงอยู่ชั่วอายุไขแล้วไปตามยถากรรมพร้อมกับกุศนาลิเทวดารุจจาเทวดาในครั้งนั้นได้มาเป็นพระอานนท์ส่วนกุศนาลิเทวดาเสวยพระชาติเป็นพระพุทธเจ้า
Thus may I daily travel along life-changing ways and find at last the changeless beyond the count of days. The Buddha now I promise my life shall ever be and always consecrated only to follow thee, only to follow thee, only to follow thee.
If you have any questions or concern, please contact us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. We will work hard to share the noble peace and sublime teachings of Buddha with you, helping you pursue a spiritual path under his wisdom. Please encourage and support those interested in the rational and enlightened teachings of the Buddha. Thank you for watching. And we believe our program on Buddha Dharma TV will inspire peace lovers around the world. Good night. Namo Buddhaya.